In the flickering shadows of Seoul's neon-lit streets, where ancient spirits dance with digital beats, a new kind of mythology has emerged. It is not carved in stone or whispered in temple halls, but animated in brilliant colors and set to the rhythm of modern music. This is the world of K-pop demon hunters, where centuries-old Korean folklore collides with contemporary pop culture in ways that would make the ancient storytellers both proud and bewildered. What you see on screen is not merely entertainment. It is a carefully woven tapestry of beliefs that have haunted the Korean peninsula for over 1,000 years. Every demon that rises from smoke, every mystical barrier that trembles under supernatural pressure, every soul-stealing antagonist carries within it the DNA of legends that were old when the great dynasties first carved their names into history. The brilliance of this animated world lies not in its departure from tradition, but in its profound respect for it. The creators have reached deep into the wellspring of Korean mythology and pulled forth creatures and concepts that most of the world has never encountered. They have taken the sacred and the terrifying, the protective and the destructive, and breathed new life into them through the language of modern storytelling. To understand the true depth of K-pop demon hunters, we must journey backward through time, into the mist-shrouded valleys and mountain temples where these stories were born. We must walk the paths of ancient shamans and listen to the whispers of spirits that were believed to inhabit every rock, every tree, every shadow that fell across the land. The world of Korean mythology is vast and complex, a universe where the boundaries between life and death, human and spirit, good and evil, are far more fluid than Western minds might expect. It is a cosmology built upon the understanding that the visible world is merely the surface of a much deeper reality. One teeming with invisible forces that can bless or curse, protect or destroy depending on how they are approached and honored. In this ancient Korean worldview, death was not an ending but a transition, overseen by beings whose duty was both sacred and terrible. The afterlife was not a distant heaven or hell, but a carefully organized bureaucracy where souls were judged, sorted, and assigned their proper destinations by divine officials who took their responsibilities with utmost seriousness. The messengers of this cosmic order were beings known as the Jeoseung Saja, figures who would become the inspiration for one of K-pop demon hunters' most memorable antagonists. But to call them simply messengers would be to diminish their true significance in Korean spiritual thought. They were the embodiment of inevitability itself, the quiet certainty that all earthly journeys must eventually come to an end. Unlike the hooded specter of Western imagination, these Korean reapers were not harbingers of violence or malice. They appeared as dignified officials dressed in the formal attire of court bureaucrats, carrying out their duties with a mixture of solemnity and compassion. Their presence was not meant to inspire terror but acceptance. They represented the natural order of things, the cosmic balance that ensures all souls find their proper place in the grand design. In traditional Korean art and literature, the Jeoseung Saja were often depicted as scholarly figures, carrying scrolls that contained the names and fates of mortals. They moved through the world with quiet authority, never rushing, never cruel, but absolutely inexorable in their purpose. When they came for a soul, it was not because they chose to, but because the time had come as determined by forces far greater than themselves. This concept of divine messengers working within a celestial bureaucracy reflects a uniquely Korean understanding of death and judgment. In this system, the afterlife was not a place of eternal reward or punishment, but a complex realm where souls were processed, evaluated, and ultimately sent to their next stage of existence. It was a view of death that emphasized justice over mercy, order over chaos, and the importance of living a life worthy of favorable judgment. The figure who presided over this cosmic court was Yomra Daewang, the king of the underworld whose authority extended over all matters of life, death, and rebirth. In Korean mythology, Yomra Daewang was not a devil or demon, but a stern and impartial judge whose decisions shaped the destiny of every soul that passed through his domain. His palace was said to be a vast complex of courts and chambers, where the deeds of the living were weighed with perfect precision. Yomra Daewang represented the ultimate expression of divine justice in Korean thought. He was neither kind nor cruel, but absolutely fair, dispensing judgment based solely on the moral weight of each soul's earthly actions. His court was a place where wealth, status, and earthly power meant nothing, where only the true character of the deceased mattered in determining their fate. This cosmic judge was served by an army of officials and clerks, all working to maintain the delicate balance between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. The system they operated was one of perfect order, where every soul was accounted for, every life measured, and every destiny assigned according to immutable spiritual law. But Korean mythology also recognized that this divine order was constantly under threat from forces of chaos and corruption. There existed beings and spirits whose very nature was to disrupt the cosmic balance, to steal souls that did not rightfully belong to them, and to twist the natural processes of death and rebirth for their own dark purposes. These malevolent entities understood that power in the spiritual realm came from the accumulation of human souls. The more souls a demon could corrupt, control, or consume, the stronger it became, until eventually it might challenge even the authority of Yomra Daewang himself. This eternal struggle between order and chaos, justice and corruption, divine law and demonic rebellion formed the backdrop against which many of Korea's greatest supernatural stories were told. In the mountain villages and remote temples of ancient Korea, shamans known as mudang served as the primary defenders against these supernatural threats. These were individuals, usually women, who possessed the ability to communicate with spirits, perform protective rituals, and maintain the spiritual barriers that kept malevolent forces at bay. The mudang were not merely fortune tellers or folk healers, though they served those functions as well. They were the frontline soldiers in an ongoing war between the forces of light and darkness, using their voices, their rituals, and their deep understanding of the spirit world to protect their communities from supernatural harm. Their power came not from physical strength or magical artifacts, but from their ability to harmonize with the natural and supernatural forces that surrounded them. Through song, dance, and elaborate ceremonies, they could strengthen the invisible barriers that separated the human world from the realm of dangerous spirits. These protective barriers were understood to be fragile things, dependent not only on the skill of the mudang who maintained them, but on the spiritual health of the entire community. Fear, guilt, discord, and moral corruption could weaken these defenses, leaving villages vulnerable to supernatural attack. This ancient understanding of spiritual warfare, of protective barriers maintained through ritual and song, of the eternal struggle between cosmic order and demonic chaos, provides the mythological foundation upon which Kpop Demon Hunters builds its modern narrative. The transformation of these ancient concepts into contemporary entertainment represents more than simple adaptation. It demonstrates the enduring power of Korean mythology to speak to universal human experiences, to address our deepest fears and greatest hopes through the language of the supernatural. The ancient Korean understanding of supernatural creatures extends far beyond the realm of death and judgment into a vibrant ecosystem of spirits that inhabited every corner of the natural world. Among these beings, none were more beloved or more feared than the Dokkaebi, the shape-shifting tricksters whose very existence challenged human understanding of reality itself. To encounter a Dokkaebi was to step into a world where the laws of nature bent and twisted according to whim and mischief. These were not the grotesque goblins of European folklore twisted by greed and malice, but something far more complex and unpredictable. They were spirits of transformation, beings whose very essence was change, chaos, and the unexpected. In the flickering firelight of village homes, Korean storytellers would speak of Dokkaebi emerging from the most ordinary objects. An old broom left unused for too long might absorb enough spiritual energy to suddenly sprout legs and begin dancing through the house. A worn-out pot might develop consciousness and begin playing pranks on its former owners. Even simple household tools could transform into mischievous spirits if left neglected in dark corners where spiritual energy could accumulate. This transformation was not random but followed ancient patterns understood by those versed in the ways of spirits. Objects that had served humans faithfully for many years were believed to develop a kind of consciousness, a spiritual awareness that could manifest as a Dokkaebi. The longer an object had been in service, the more likely it was to undergo this mystical metamorphosis. The Dokkaebi possessed abilities that made them formidable opponents or valuable allies, depending on their mood and the character of those who encountered them. Their most famous tool was the bangmangsi, a magical club that could summon objects from thin air or transform worthless materials into gold and precious gems. With a single swing of this enchanted weapon, a Dokkaebi could create feasts from nothing, conjure palaces from dust, or make rivers flow backward. But the Dokkaebi were not mere magical vending machines dispensing wishes to whoever found them. They were creatures of challenge and test, beings who delighted in measuring the character and wit of humans through elaborate games and contests. They might challenge a traveler to a wrestling match, with the winner claiming a fabulous prize and the loser facing humiliation or worse. These contests were never simple tests of physical strength or luck. The Dokkaebi were said to be able to peer into the hearts of mortals to understand their deepest desires and fears. Their games were designed to reveal character, to separate the worthy from the unworthy, the clever from the foolish, the brave from the cowardly. A farmer who showed kindness to a disguised Dokkaebi might find his fields blessed with abundant harvests. A merchant who tried to cheat one of these spirits might discover his goods transformed into worthless stones. The Dokkaebi operated according to a morality that was both ancient and immediate, rewarding virtue and punishing vice with equal enthusiasm. Their shape-shifting abilities extended far beyond simple disguises. A Dokkaebi could become a rock to trip an unwary traveler, transform into a beautiful woman to test a man's faithfulness, or take the form of a wise old scholar to engage in philosophical debates. They were masters of illusion, capable of creating entire false realities that could trap the unwary for days or years. Yet despite their formidable powers, the Dokkaebi possessed curious weaknesses that clever humans could exploit. They were said to be unable to see behind themselves, making them vulnerable to attacks from their blind spots. They were also compulsively honest when directly questioned, unable to lie even when it would serve their purposes better. These supernatural beings served a crucial function in Korean society beyond mere entertainment. They were teachers of wisdom, enforcers of moral behavior, and guardians of the boundary between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Through their stories, children learned about the importance of treating all things with respect, understanding that even the humblest object might possess hidden consciousness and power. The Dokkaebi tales also served as a form of social commentary, often featuring these spirits punishing the greedy, the cruel, or the arrogant while rewarding those who showed kindness, cleverness, and respect for the natural order. They were agents of cosmic justice operating outside the formal structures of human society. In the visual arts of traditional Korea, particularly in the folk paintings known as minhwa, these supernatural themes found vivid expression. The minhwa represented a departure from the formal aristocratic art of the royal courts, offering instead a vibrant and accessible form of artistic expression that spoke directly to the experiences and beliefs of common people. Among the most beloved subjects of minhwa were the whimsical depictions of tigers, creatures that in these folk paintings bore little resemblance to the fearsome predators of reality. Instead, these artistic tigers appeared almost comically endearing, with round faces, gentle expressions, and poses that suggested playfulness rather than ferocity. These tigers, often called dorky or derpy tigers by modern observers, represented a uniquely Korean approach to depicting power and authority. Rather than emphasizing fear and dominance, these artistic interpretations showed strength tempered by humor and approachability. They suggested that true power need not be intimidating or cruel, but could coexist with gentleness and even absurdity. Frequently accompanying these tigers in minhwa paintings were magpies, birds that held special significance in Korean culture as symbols of good fortune and clever communication. The magpie was believed to be a messenger between the human and spirit worlds, capable of carrying prayers to the gods and bringing back divine responses. The pairing of tigers and magpies in these folk paintings created a dynamic that spoke to Korean values of balance and complementarity. The tiger represented raw power and courage, while the magpie embodied intelligence and adaptability. Together, they suggested that the ideal approach to life's challenges required both strength and wisdom, both boldness and cleverness. These artistic traditions reflected a broader Korean understanding of the world as a place where apparent opposites could coexist and complement each other. Strength and gentleness, power and humility, the fearsome and the endearing could all be part of the same complex reality. The influence of these traditional beliefs extended into every aspect of Korean life, including the personal adornments and protective talismans that people wore to guard themselves against supernatural threats. Among these protective objects, the norage held special significance as both decoration and spiritual shield. These intricate pendants, traditionally worn by Korean women, were far more than mere jewelry. Each norage was carefully crafted to incorporate symbols and materials, believed to possess protective properties against evil spirits and negative influences. The designs often included representations of auspicious animals, protective deities, and geometric patterns that were thought to confuse or repel malevolent forces. The norage served as a bridge between the aesthetic and the sacred, embodying the Korean belief that beauty and protection could be woven together into a single powerful object. Women would choose specific combinations of jade, gold, silver, and precious stones, not merely for their visual appeal, but for the spiritual qualities each material was believed to possess. Jade, with its cool green depths, was thought to ward off jealousy and negative emotions. Gold represented the purifying power of the sun, capable of burning away spiritual impurities. Silver connected the wearer to the cleansing energy of the moon, while certain gemstones were believed to create barriers against specific types of supernatural interference. The very act of wearing these carefully chosen materials transformed the wearer into a living talisman, protected by the accumulated wisdom of generations. The crafting of a norage was itself a ritual process, often involving prayers and ceremonies designed to infuse the object with protective power. Master artisans would time their work according to lunar cycles and seasonal changes, understanding that the spiritual potency of their creations depended not only on physical skill but on alignment with cosmic forces. This integration of the practical and the mystical extended throughout Korean material culture, creating a world where even the most mundane objects carried spiritual significance. Kitchen utensils, farming tools, and household items were all understood to exist within a web of supernatural relationships that required careful attention and respect. The Korean understanding of spiritual protection was never passive or static. It required constant maintenance, renewal, and vigilance from those who sought to remain safe from supernatural threats. This active participation in one's own spiritual defense created a culture where individuals felt empowered to confront the unknown, armed with both ancient wisdom and personal agency. The shamanic traditions that provided the foundation for this worldview emphasized the importance of maintaining harmony between the human and spirit worlds through careful ritual observance and respectful behavior. The Mudang understood that their protective barriers were not permanent fortifications, but living, breathing defenses that responded to the spiritual health of the communities they served. When discord arose within a village, when people harbored deep resentments or committed acts of cruelty, the protective barriers would weaken, allowing malevolent spirits to seep through the cracks in the community's spiritual armor. This created a powerful incentive for social harmony and moral behavior, as individual transgressions could endanger the entire community. The concept of collective spiritual responsibility permeated Korean society at every level. Families were expected to maintain proper relationships with their ancestors through regular ceremonies and offerings. Villages needed to honor the local spirits that governed their wells, mountains, and fields. Even the kingdom itself required careful attention to the cosmic forces that influenced the fate of nations. This understanding of interconnected spiritual reality created a culture where the boundaries between the personal and the cosmic were constantly blurred. An individual's moral choices could influence the weather patterns that affected the harvest. A family's neglect of ancestral duties could bring misfortune upon their neighbors. A ruler's failure to maintain proper relationships with heaven could result in earthquakes, floods, or foreign invasions. The shamanic worldview recognized that power in the spiritual realm operated according to principles that were both predictable and mysterious. Certain rituals, when performed correctly, would produce reliable results. Specific offerings would appease particular spirits. Protective barriers could be strengthened through the proper combination of song, dance, and ceremonial objects. Yet the spirit world also contained elements of chaos and unpredictability that could never be fully controlled or understood. Even the most skilled mudang could be surprised by the behavior of spirits, forced to adapt their techniques to meet unexpected challenges. This balance between knowledge and mystery kept the shamanic tradition dynamic and responsive to changing circumstances. The Korean supernatural cosmos was populated by a vast hierarchy of beings, each with their own domains, powers, and preferences. At the highest levels were the great cosmic forces that governed the fundamental processes of existence. Below them were the regional deities who controlled specific geographical areas or natural phenomena. Beneath these were the local spirits who inhabited particular mountains, rivers, or forests. At the most intimate level were the household spirits who lived alongside human families, sometimes helpful, sometimes mischievous, but always present as invisible participants in daily life. These domestic spirits required regular attention and offerings, but they also provided protection and prosperity to families who treated them with proper respect. The complexity of this spiritual ecosystem meant that navigating the supernatural world required extensive knowledge and careful judgment. A shaman needed to understand not only which spirits to approach for specific problems, but also how to avoid offending other beings who might take exception to certain rituals or requests. This intricate web of supernatural relationships created a culture where spiritual literacy was not a luxury, but a necessity for survival and prosperity. Children learned from an early age to recognize the signs of spiritual activity, to understand when they were entering sacred spaces, and to behave appropriately in the presence of invisible powers. The educational process was not formal or systematic, but embedded in daily life through stories, songs, and shared experiences. Grandparents would point out unusual natural formations that served as homes for spirits. Parents would explain the proper way to approach sacred trees or springs. Community elders would share tales of encounters with supernatural beings both as entertainment and as instruction in spiritual survival. These teaching methods created a population that was spiritually aware and prepared to recognize supernatural threats or opportunities when they arose. The stories served as both warning and guide, illustrating the consequences of inappropriate behavior, while demonstrating the rewards that could come from wise interaction with the spirit world. The narrative structure of these traditional tales often followed patterns that reflected deeper truths about the nature of spiritual reality. Heroes who succeeded in their quests typically demonstrated virtues of courage, respect, cleverness, and moral integrity. Those who failed often exhibited traits of greed, arrogance, cruelty, or disrespect for the natural order. These moral patterns were not arbitrary but reflected the Korean understanding that the spirit world operated according to ethical principles that rewarded virtue and punished vice. The supernatural beings who populated these stories were not capricious or random in their behavior, but responded to human character according to consistent if sometimes mysterious rules. The transformation of these ancient mythological concepts into contemporary entertainment represents a remarkable achievement in cultural translation. The creators of K-pop Demon Hunters have managed to preserve the essential spiritual DNA of Korean folklore while adapting it to the visual language and narrative expectations of modern global audiences. This process required more than simple cosmetic updates to traditional stories. It demanded a deep understanding of the underlying principles that made these myths meaningful to their original audiences, coupled with the creative vision to express those same principles through contemporary media. The result is a work that functions simultaneously as entertainment and cultural preservation, introducing international audiences to Korean mythological concepts while demonstrating the continued relevance of these ancient stories to modern Korean identity. The visual design of the animated world draws heavily on traditional Korean aesthetic principles while incorporating contemporary elements that make the mythology accessible to viewers unfamiliar with Korean cultural references. Color palettes, architectural styles, and character designs all reflect careful research into historical sources while maintaining the visual appeal necessary for modern animation. The musical elements of the production serve a particularly important function in bridging ancient and contemporary Korean culture. The integration of K-pop musical styles with traditional Korean spiritual concepts creates a unique fusion that honors both the shamanic traditions of the past and the global cultural influence of contemporary Korea. This musical synthesis reflects a deeper truth about Korean cultural identity in the modern world. Rather than abandoning traditional beliefs in favor of contemporary forms, Korean culture has consistently found ways to adapt ancient wisdom to new circumstances, creating hybrid forms that preserve essential spiritual insights while remaining relevant to changing times. The success of this cultural translation process suggests that the mythological foundations of Korean folklore contain universal elements that can speak across cultural and linguistic boundaries while retaining their distinctive Korean character. The echoes of these ancient traditions reverberate through every frame of K-pop demon hunters, creating a tapestry where the sacred and the contemporary dance together in perfect harmony. But perhaps the most profound achievement of this animated masterpiece lies not in its individual mythological elements, but in its understanding of the deeper spiritual architecture that connects them all. In the traditional Korean worldview, the concept of barriers between realms was never merely physical. These were living, breathing boundaries that responded to the spiritual state of those who maintained them. The ancient Mudang understood that their protective rituals were not mechanical processes but dynamic relationships with forces that demanded constant attention, respect, and renewal. This understanding transforms the central conflict of K-pop demon hunters from a simple battle between good and evil into something far more nuanced and spiritually authentic. The weakening of the mystical barrier that contains the demonic forces is not caused by external attack alone, but by internal discord, doubt, and the failure to maintain proper spiritual harmony. Through the neon glow of modern soul and the ancient mists of mountain temples, K-pop Demon Hunters reveals itself as more than entertainment. It stands as a bridge between worlds, proving that the deepest truths of Korean mythology remain as vital today as they were 1,000 years ago. In every demon battle and mystical barrier, we witness the eternal human struggle to maintain harmony between chaos and order, proving that some stories are truly timeless,